My name is James. I grew up in a small town in Ireland, but the stories we told about the Miller house in Ravenswood, Vermont, held a special kind of dread. It wasn't just a ghost story. It was an annual phenomenon, a dark stain on the map of New England that we somehow knew about across the ocean. Every Halloween, for as long as anyone could remember, the sound of laughter would spill from its broken windows. Children's giggles, a woman's delighted shriek, the deep rumble of a man's belly laugh. It would echo across the barren hill for exactly 1 hour, starting at 9 o'clock. And then, at 10, it would stop, not fade, but cease, as if severed by a blade. 5 years ago, armed with digital recorders, EMF meters, and the foolish courage of youth, my friends Liam, Sarah, and I decided to spend Halloween night inside. We had driven from Burlington, the urban normalcy of Church Street Marketplace feeling a world away as we navigated the increasingly narrow backroads of Addison County, the skeletal branches of maple trees clawing at the sides of our rental car. We crossed the threshold at 8:45 p.m., our heavy boots crunching on the grit, covered marble of the foyer. The air was frigid and carried the sense of old dust, dry rot, and something else, a faint, sweet odor like spoiled milk. Our breath plumed in the beams of our flashlights. The house was a time capsule of a life abruptly abandoned. A fine china set was still laid out on the dining room table, now coated in a gray fuzz, and a child's wooden train sat on the bottom stair. We set up a base camp in the parlor, our equipment looking absurdly modern against the moth-eaten velvet furniture and a large, soot-blackened fireplace that smelled of cold ashes. At 9:00 p.m. precisely, the laughter began. It didn't come from one place but from everywhere at once. Layered and impossibly clear, it was joyous, infectious, and utterly horrifying. As the laughter swirled around us, Liam pointed his recorder toward the ceiling, a grin on his face. But the grin faltered. The needle on the EMF meter spiked into the red and stayed there. The laughter was all around us, yet our microphones picked up only a faint, staticky whisper. That's when I felt it for the first time. A subtle draining sensation, a hollowing out. The genuine excitement and nervous thrill I'd felt upon entering began to leach away, replaced by a cold, leaden weight. Sarah, who had been laughing nervously moments before, now had a face pale and drawn. "It doesn't want us to record it," she whispered. "It wants us to feel it." I tried to grasp a happy memory, my grandfather teaching me to fish on the river Suir, but the image in my mind was gray, silent, and emotionally flat. Driven by a morbid curiosity that was quickly curdling into dread, we left the parlor and ascended the grand staircase. Each step groaned a protest. The second-floor hallway was a tunnel of darkness, the doors all shut. The laughter here was different, sharper, more localized. It seemed to be coming from behind the doors. Liam, ever the skeptic, reached for the tarnished brass knob of the last door on the left. The moment his fingers made contact, the laughter in the entire house shifted. The joy was gone, replaced by a mocking, cruel cackle that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. He pulled his hand back as if burned. We all felt colder. I noticed then that the temperature on my digital watch had dropped to 24 degrees Fahrenheit. The air itself felt thick, resistant, like wading through water. We pushed open a different door, one that swung inward without a sound. It was a nursery. The laughter here was the loudest, a constant, gurgling giggle that seemed to emanate from the empty space in the center of the room. On the small desk, the open drawing book showed a new image that hadn't been there moments before, a crude crayon drawing of 3 stick figures standing in a spiral, their mouths wide open in screams, though the sound coming from the room was still one of manic glee. Sarah let out a choked gasp and backed away, stumbling against the hallway wall. "It's not an echo," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a recording. It's trapping the sound, and it's trapping the feeling that went with it. It's digesting." The mocking laughter felt like a physical pressure, pushing us, hurting us. We found ourselves not retreating toward the front door, but moving deeper into the house, toward a narrow, servant staircase that led to the 3rd floor. A heavy iron padlock, which we had noted earlier was sealed shut with rust, now lay on the floor, its hasp bent and broken as if by tremendous force. The air pouring down the stairwell was so cold it hurt to breathe, carrying a new smell, the electric, metallic tang of a storm about to break. The house was inviting us, or commanding us, to go up. Sarah shook her head, tears freezing on her cheeks. "It's taking it," she stammered. Every time I try to think of a happy memory, it just slips away. I knew what she meant. The very concept of joy was becoming a distant, theoretical thing. The attic was the heart of it. The laughter was deafening here, a maddening cacophony of every happy sound the house had ever stolen. It was no longer an echo, it was a living thing, a presence that filled the space. In the center of the room, drawn in the dust, was a large spiral, and at its center sat that single, white porcelain mask, fixed with a wide, gleeful smile. It was the source of the sound. The laughter wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from the mask. As we stared, the recorded laughter from our past, our own nervous giggles from when we first entered, joined the chorus, played back at us from the void. The house was feeding, and we were the meal. I watched as Liam, standing too close to the spiral, visibly flinched. A genuine, warm smile he had worn hours earlier was now gone from his face, replaced by a slack, empty expression, as if the memory of the feeling had been physically scooped out of him. We ran. The laughter turned into a wail of fury. The sound of a beast denied its full feast. The house fought back. The attic door slammed shut behind us, the sound like a gunshot. The hallway on the second floor seemed to have lengthened, the doors now slamming open and shut in a chaotic rhythm. The temperature plummeted, and our flashlight beams flickered, threatening to die. We stumbled down the main staircase, our bodies heavy, our minds numb. We burst out the front door and into the cold Vermont night, not stopping until we reached our car at the bottom of the hill. We sat in silence, the only sound our ragged, sobbing breaths. The Miller house stood dark and silent on its hill. It had taken its payment. Liam never laughed again, not a real laugh. Sarah can't remember her mother's face. And I can feel the hollow space inside me where my happiest childhood memories used to be. The house is still there, waiting for the next Halloween, ready to feed again. It never lets anyone leave without taking something. My name is Liam. For generations, my family has worked this land, 1,200 acres of rich, loamy soil just outside the real, quiet town of Broken Bow in Custer County, Nebraska. It's a place of hard work and simple truths, where the horizon is a straight line and the sky is a vast, empty cup. Every autumn, after the harvest, we'd carve a 20-acre maze into the standing corn for the Halloween season. It was a local tradition, a bit of harmless fun that brought in families from Broken Bow, Myrna, even as far as Ansley. We'd sell hot cider and pumpkin donuts. At least, we did until last year. The night it happened, October 31st, was unseasonably cold. A sharp, biting wind swept down from the sandhills, carrying the scent of frost and decaying vegetation. We had a record crowd. The parking field was a sea of pickup trucks and minivans. My younger brother, Evan, was managing the entrance, his breath pluming in the air as he laughed and handed out maps. He was the charismatic one, the one who remembered everyone's name. I was always more comfortable with machinery than people, content to stay in the background and keep the farm running. The maze was a complex labyrinth of my own design, but that night, it felt alien. The rustling of the corn seemed to form words, and the pathways felt like they were shifting when no one was looking. The first call came to my cell phone at 9:17 p.m., a frantic mother from Sargent who couldn't find her son and daughter. We immediately shut down the entrance, my heart beginning a dull, heavy rhythm against my ribs. We organized search parties, farm hands, deputies, volunteers. Our flashlight beams cut weak, swinging paths through the absolute blackness between the 8-foot-tall corn walls. Then more reports came in. A group of 4 university students from Kearney, an elderly couple, the Millers, who had been coming to the maze since it started. 8 people in total. And even, he grabbed a 2-way radio and a high-powered lantern and marched into the heart of the maze to coordinate. His last transmission was a crackle of static, then silence. They searched all night. They used dogs, drones, and every able body from Custer County. They found nothing. It was as if the earth had opened up and swallowed them whole. The official explanation, after weeks of investigation, was a mass prank or a possible trafficking ring, though no one could explain the lack of evidence or motive. The case went cold as the prairie winter set in, the land freezing into a silent, white monument. But I farm this land. I know its contours and its secrets like I know the lines on my own hands. The police with their dogs and their technology missed it. but I found it in late November, after a 3-day rain washed the topsoil away from the center of the maze as a perfect, straight seam in the earth. It was hidden under a thick, woven mat of old roots and corn husks. A 3-foot by 3-foot hatch of rotted, splintering wood, its iron pull ring caked with rust and dirt. It smelled of wet clay, decay, and a faint, coppery tang that made the hair on my arms stand up. I waited until midnight, when the farm was silent and the moon was a sliver behind thick clouds. I returned alone with a diesel-powered work light, a crowbar, and my grandfather's old hunting rifle. The wood of the hatch splintered with a sound like a gunshot in the stillness. The stairs that were revealed went down about 12 feet into a chill that had nothing to do with the Nebraska autumn. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for my shoulders, shored up with aged, blackened railroad ties that looked like they'd been salvaged from a line abandoned before my grandfather was born. The walls were not just dirt, they were packed with a horrific aggregate: animal bones yellowed with age, shattered glass from old medicine bottles, and countless strands of that same vibrant scarlet thread, all woven and pressed into the earth to form a dense, unsettling tapestry. The air was thick and still, carrying the smell of spoiled grain, cold iron, and the profound damp of a deep place. The tunnel ran for what felt like 50 yards, then opened abruptly into a circular chamber, the size of my machine shed. This was the heart of it, the place where they were taken. My work light illuminated a scene of methodical horror. The walls were a consolidated history of violation. I saw children's shoes, tiny sneakers and little leather boots, caked in decades of mud. I saw rusted farm implements, sickles and scythes, twisted into unnatural shapes. And I saw the threads, thousands of them, forming a vast, spiraling symbol that covered the entire domed ceiling, a design that seemed to shift and writhe in the periphery of my vision, making me nauseous. The ground was stamped flat and hard, a ritual space centered around a crude, stone altar that was stained a deep, indelible black. This was no random occurrence. This was an old, patient evil. The maze wasn't my creation. I had just been the caretaker for a feeding ground. It was a trap, laid out season after season, using my farm, my family's land, to lure the unsuspecting to a pre-dug grave. My light beam, trembling in my hand, caught a familiar glint of polished metal near the base of the altar stone. I knelt, the cold of the earth seeping through my jeans. It was Evan's Zippo lighter, the one I'd given him for his 18th birthday. The initials EF were staring back at me from the dirt. He'd been here, in this hole. He had seen this. The town was wrong. It wasn't a prank or a kidnapping. It was a harvest, a culling. And as I stood there in that silent, profane space, a cold certainty settled deep into my marrow, colder than the Nebraska ground in January. The maze was dormant now, sleeping. But next Halloween, it would wake up hungry again. It had tasted my family. It had tasted my brother. His lighter was not a clue left behind, it was a receipt, a token proving the transaction was complete. And I was the only one left who knew. The keeper of the gate was now the intended sacrifice. I was next in line. In the year that followed, I became a ghost on my own land. I stopped farming the maize acreage, letting the corn stand and rot. I spent my days in the Broken Bow Library and the Custer County Historical Archives, digging through microfiche and brittle, paged ledgers. I learned that this land was once a meeting place for a transient group known as the Prairie Starvation Cult. In the 1890s, a desperate collection of drought-stricken homesteaders who believed ancient, hungry things slept in the earth and could be appeased with offerings. Their symbols, sketched in a farmer's diary, matched the threads on the wall. The disappearances weren't a new phenomenon, they were a cycle. A man in 1923, a family picnicking in 1955, all written off as tragedies of the harsh plains life. The days grew shorter. The air turned crisp again. Halloween loomed on the calendar like an execution date. I considered burning the entire field, but a deep, primal fear told me that would only anger it, that the fire might spread something worse than flame. I thought of running, of leaving the foster land for the first time in over a century. But I could feel the land itself holding me, a subtle pressure like a hook in my soul. The maze was waiting. It had chosen its next offering, the last of the Fosters. It is October 31st again. The wind is blowing just like last year. I sit on the porch of the silent farmhouse, my grandfather's rifle across my knees. I will not wait for it to come for me in my sleep. I will not be taken from my bed. The town thinks I'm a grieving, broken man. They're only half right. I am grieving, but I am not broken. I am resolved. When the moon reaches its zenith tonight, I will walk into the maze. I will not carry a flashlight. I will follow the pull in my blood, the same pull that guided me to the hatch. I will go to the center. I will go down into the earth. I will face what took my brother. This is my land. My family's blood is in this soil, and tonight I will see if it's thirsty for more. My name is Isabella. The invitation arrived on heavy, cream-colored parchment, sealed with black wax imprinted with a symbol I didn't recognize, a serpent coiled around a key. It promised an exclusive Halloween party at Blackwater Manor, a secluded estate deep in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. As a historian, I was intrigued by the mention of the manor's unrecorded past, and against my better judgment, I drove the winding, desolate roads from Burlington, Vermont, into the heart of the wilderness. The GPS signal died 10 miles out, and I relied on hand-drawn maps included with the invitation, my tires crunching over gravel and fallen pine needles until the mansion loomed ahead, a hulking silhouette against the bruised twilight sky. The heavy oak door swung open before I could knock, revealing a cavernous foyer that smelled of damp stone, beeswax, and something else, something metallic and old, like dried blood. About 24 other guests mingled nervously, their elaborate costumes, Victorian ghosts, plague doctors, and gilded skeletons, seeming absurd against the manor's genuine decay. Our host, Monsieur Lefebvre, emerged from the shadows. He was a tall, gaunt man with silver hair and eyes the color of a winter sky, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light. He did not smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice a soft, chilling whisper that carried through the hall. "You are here because you are connected to this place, whether you know it or not. Tonight, you will play a game. It is not for prizes, but for survival. The puzzles you solve will reveal the manor's history, and in doing so, your own." The first clue was handed to us on slips of yellowed paper that felt like dried skin. Mine read, "Find the truth where the family's eyes are blind." We scattered through the manor, a labyrinth of dark wood paneling and endless corridors. I found myself in a long gallery lined with portraits of the Blackwater family, their eyes seeming to follow me. One portrait, of a stern industrialist named Alistair Blackwater, had eyes painted over with black paint. Behind it, I discovered a hidden compartment containing a journal entry dated 1888. It detailed how Alistair had covered up a mining accident that killed dozens of men to protect his fortune, bribing officials and silencing witnesses. As I read, a cold draft swept through the hall and the gas lamps flickered. I heard a faint, grinding sound from deeper within the house, followed by a stifled scream that was cut short. One by one, guests began to vanish. A woman in a sequined flapper costume, who had been frantically solving a puzzle about a poisoned well on the property, simply disappeared from the library. All that remained was her headpiece, crushed on the floor. A man dressed as a Revolutionary War soldier, who had uncovered evidence of Lefebvre's involvement in smuggling operations during Prohibition, was next. We found his treat corner hat floating in a rainwater-filled basin in the conservatory. Panic set in. We tried the doors, but they were locked. The windows were barred from the outside. Our phones had no signal. Monsieur Lefebvre watched from the shadows, a faint, unnerving smile playing on his lips. "The house knows your secrets," he murmured. "It feeds on them." I paired with a quiet man named David, who was dressed as a simple farmer. Our puzzle led us to the library, where we had to align the astrolabe with constellations painted on the ceiling to reveal a hidden message. The foundation is built on lies. David confessed to me in a hushed tone that his great-grandfather had worked in a factory owned by the Blackwaters, and had died in a fire that was ruled an accident. But he always suspected negligence. As he spoke, the temperature in the room dropped sharply. The books on the shelves began to tremble, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow, descending staircase. From the darkness below, a low, guttural whisper echoed, repeating the word Liar over and over. David's face went pale. He backed away, but an unseen force pulled him into the stairwell. The wall slammed shut, and he was gone. Alone and trembling, I realized the horrifying truth. This wasn't just about the Blackwater family's crimes. It was a mirror. Monsieur Lefevre wasn't just a host. He was a curator of guilt, and the manor was his archive. My own family's past flashed in my mind. My great-uncle, a judge in early 20th century New York, had taken bribes to send innocent men to their deaths, one of whom was a Blackwater heir. I had dedicated my life to uncovering historical truths to atone for a sin I never committed, and now I was trapped in its physical manifestation. The final puzzle was for me. I descended into the basement, a cold, earth-floored space that reeked of decay. There, etched into the stone wall, was a list of names, the men who died in the covered-up mining accident. My task was to add the missing name, the one my great-uncle had erased from the record. As I used the flint to scratch the final name, Elias Grimshaw, into the stone, the wall trembled. The carved names began to bleed a dark, thick fluid. The whispers I'd heard all night coalesced into a single, coherent voice in my mind, recounting Elias's suffering, his family's poverty after his death, the lies that buried him. I felt his despair, his rage, as if it were my own. A figure emerged from the shadows, not Monsieur Lefevre, but a shifting, humanoid shape composed of dust and darkness, with eyes that held the void of the mine shaft. It was the collective anguish of the wrong. It did not attack me. It simply stood there, and in its presence, I understood. Survival wasn't about escaping. It was about acknowledgement. The house didn't want revenge. It wanted witness. When the sun rose, I stumbled out of the basement and through the silent manor. The doors were unlocked. The mansion was empty, save for me. There was no sign of Monsieur Lefevre or the other guests. Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the horrors of the night sealed within the stone walls behind me. I never spoke of what happened at Blackwater Manor. The police found no evidence of a party, no missing persons reports that matched the guests. Sometimes, I wonder if they were ever real, or if they were just reflections, like me. But in the dead of night, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear the whispers, and I know the house is still there, waiting for its next game.